How are you?
Good evening and welcome to this workshop of Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. Tonight, the board will hear updates from Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Mark Bedell, and Anne Arundel County Public School staff on their work with the Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts, that CKLA program, as the comprehensive elementary literacy curriculum for students in kindergarten through fifth grade. Tonight's workshop is open to the public, but no public questions or comments will be taken. This workshop is open to the public. However, as I said, no public comments will be taken. This workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS-TV, which can be found on Channel 96 on Comcast and Astound and Channel 36 on Verizon. High definition broadcast can be seen on Channel 996 on Comcast, Channel 496 on Astound, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. We're excited to have this opportunity to provide this update to the community on our Amplify curriculum as we begin to transition into the science for reading. I do want to, just before I pass it over to Dr. Duarte and his team, publicly acknowledge you all for what you did on Friday. We had a round table here with some of the folks from all around the state represented here in talking to us about lessons learned, opportunities for us to make sure that how we launch this, how we provide training, that it is going to be as seamless of a process as possible. So thank you all for putting that together for last Friday. I'm excited. I've had an opportunity to see this presentation. I think many of you on this board were, you shared with me when I started that this was one of the things you wanted to see us move towards. We're getting ready to move there. So I'll pass it over to Dr. Duarte and his team, and they will take us through what this will look like.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell, and good evening to the board members. My name is Dr. Marquise Duarte. I am the Chief Academic Officer for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I'm here with two of my colleagues, and I will certainly allow them to introduce themselves.
Amanda Salveron. I am the Manager of Academic Supports and Enhanced Programs.
Hi, good evening. Great to see you all again. Michelle Batten, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Yeah, we're going to kick things off. We are really excited about this transition to this new Amplify CKLA reading program. We obviously think this is going to be a game changer in terms of getting it right, in terms of teaching our students how to read the appropriate way. So tonight we have kind of a couple objectives. Obviously, the one is just increase everyone's understanding of this new curricular program. It is a program that is based in the tenets of the science of reading. It is a structured literacy program that has multiple components that my colleagues will be talking about in more detail in a few seconds here. We're going to talk a little about how we got here, why did we get here, and then ultimately we're going to talk about CKLA itself and the benefits we think it's going to bring to our ability to provide reading instruction at a high level. So in this slide, you'll see, as customary, is just some definitions and some acronyms. These will be words and acronyms that will be referenced throughout the presentation. I want to make sure that you guys familiarize yourself with those. There's also an addendum, additional glossary of terms that gives you more glossary of words related to the science of reading that you also have as an attachment. So we'll just give you a few seconds to look there at those definitions.
All right, so let's begin by talking, how did we get here? So as you may know, in the spring of 2023, we participated in a district-wide curriculum audit, and our elementary reading and integrated literacy office participated in that, grades 3 through 5. And as a result of the audit, they had 3 recommendations. First, to establish an updated vision of effective literacy instruction. Second, select a curriculum that is aligned with the vision. And then third, create an implementation strategy and or plan. So our elementary team began with several stakeholders across the district and our communities to craft the new elementary literacy vision. And with that being said, this vision is a vision that aligns with the essential research of the science of reading. So I'd like you to take a minute to read this vision statement. So this vision statement is our North Star. It guides our work and it reflects our beliefs and commitments. CKLA, which you will hear more about this evening, enables us to bring this vision to life as it's built on the science of how students learn to read. So through the curriculum adoption process, we participated in 3 phases that included our classroom teachers and various other district leaders and stakeholders. Phase 1 and 2 occurred in July of 2023 following our audit, and then phase 3 occurred in October of 2023 with a final approval going to the board on December 6th. Over 50 participants took part in the phased approach, which included central office members, administrators, elementary support staff, special education teachers, our advanced learners office programs, teachers of various other areas such as English language development, PYP. So we had all representations across all of our high school feeders. This slide reflects a graph that represents the results of the district committee using a rubric to evaluate the resources in multiple areas. Along the bottom axis, you'll see those categories listed. One, the alignment between the Maryland College and Career Ready standards, the use of complex and diverse text curated to topic to build a breadth of knowledge for all students to engage with and respond to rigorous questioning. Students in grades K to 2 will also engage with rich decodable text to apply their learning of foundational literacy skills. One more note about our decodable text: it forces our readers to practice their decoding skills instead of relying on pictures or guessing words, and apply their knowledge of explicitly taught phonics skills or spelling concepts. This graph also demonstrates the evaluation results from the final rating of the group of classroom teachers who are part of the phase 3 evaluation committee. This committee was composed, as I said, of teachers representing all grade levels and across all of our high school feeders. So research also shows that CKLA meets the criteria for Tier 1 strong ESSA evidence support in ed reports. Here you will see on this screen, CKA scored all green across all grade levels in text complexity, quality, building knowledge, and usability in grades K through 5. The program components are easy to navigate. All instructional resources are available for teachers and are provided to meet the needs of all of our learners. This eliminates teachers from having to pick and choose materials for teaching, as the program includes support for a wide range of educator experience and student proficiencies. Literacy is the spine that holds education together, and full support from all stakeholders is the spine that ensures a successful implementation of a new program. Built on a vertical spine of support, the team began with a focus on shifting mindsets to the science of reading to prepare for the adoption and effective implementation of CKLA. Members of the extended cabinet and leadership teams have engaged in collaborative screening of the right to read early in the adoption process, and other community groups such as the Anne Arundel Alliance of Black Educators and the Reading League of Maryland have also come together to watch this documentary and to facilitate discussions in small groups. AACPS hosted, as Dr. Bedell mentioned, our first roundtable Friday afternoon to discuss with our members from various community associations united to learn more from one another with a goal of supporting students in ACPS through a united effort. Here you will see the representation of our vertical spine as we're looking to change mindsets with our implementation. So in the document you receive, we'll talk a little bit more about year 0 that we are in, and these participants here on this side of the slide represents those individuals that have been a part of our onboarding so far. So our elementary reading and integrated literacy office has drafted a long-range plan to ensure all members along the vertical spine receive adequate and equitable professional development. Professional learning in the 23-24 school year is considered year zero, and it is focused on shifting the mindsets, and it is also preparing for the adoption and effective implementation of CKLA. You have a copy of year zero, I believe, in the packet that was provided for you. In year two, which will be 24-25, the focus of professional learning is to support all elementary educators in implementing CKLA with integrity. In years 2 through 6, from 2025 through 2029, the focus for professional learning will be to sharpen educators' program knowledge, improve teaching and learning through coaching, and continuing to refine professional learning offerings based on our data collected in classroom visits, walkthroughs, and assessment feedback. So let's take a look at our professional learning so far that has occurred this year to date in preparation for our effective implementation of CKLA. Partnered with a professional learning strategist from Amplify, the elementary literacy team has designed 17 unique sessions to provide background knowledge in the science of reading and demonstrate the alignment of the body of research to our new comprehensive literacy curriculum, CKLA. These sessions have been offered over 64 times. This results in a greater than 121 hours of professional learning across various stakeholders. And these sessions have accommodated 2,764 participants in the plans to reach thousands more before the start of next school year.
So we're going to transition now to take a look at why CKLA was chosen as the new elementary literacy curriculum. So this may look familiar. CKLA is built on the science of reading research. The simple view of reading, or this model here, is commonly associated with that research. This equation shows us that in order for proficient reading to occur, students have to be successful in both decoding and word recognition, as well as language comprehension. In CKLA, kindergarten through second grade separates these two components. This is a visual from CKLA, but it probably looks very familiar to some of you as Scarborough's rope. Students in K-2 actually participate in two CKLA lessons each day, knowledge and skills. So during the knowledge lesson, students build knowledge through a variety of texts and building the different language comprehension areas. In the skills, we work on word recognition through that structured literacy approach. This approach does include explicit instruction in phonological awareness, phonics, blending, segmenting, and fluency. In grade 3 to 5, it's going to look just a little bit different because the two lessons, knowledge and integrated skills, become one strand, and these are integrated together. So that includes, again, the knowledge, but also advanced language standards for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. CKLA is based on, again, these 3 design principles or tenets: building background knowledge, again, text complexity, as well as connecting the reading and writing. As we have seen, research shows us that an effective curriculum really needs to be systematic and structured around the knowledge that is presented to our students. As you can see here, CKLA has different knowledge chunks woven within all of the grade levels in kindergarten through 5th grade. And this really fosters making connections from year to year. Topics within the grade level, which would be vertically here in this picture, are also sequenced in a way to build knowledge and specifically vocabulary. Through diverse and complex texts, CKLA uses topics from arts, science, social studies to teach these standards of English language arts. And it also demonstrates that real cross-curricular component throughout the grade levels. This allowed students to really build a wide and deep breadth of knowledge in a variety of areas, again, both within the grade level as well as across multiple grade levels. You'll see here that we've chosen to pull out literature and science, but as I shared, there are a variety of other social studies, arts, connections, again, throughout K to 5. So there are 3 types of reading that occur within the design of CKLA, and students are given texts which are substantially above grade level, with which they engage orally. One of the really unique features of CKLA is the use of teacher read alouds, right? So this is the teachers reading aloud to their students. And it's pretty intense with these texts and these images that, again, are shared with students around building knowledge. There's compelling research that tells us that listening comprehension and reading comprehension in the elementary years, especially primary, can be up to 2 years difference. So again, really thinking about that reading comprehension, building that listening comprehension around their knowledge. It builds their vocabulary. Again, it builds their depth of knowledge, specifically during the read aloud time. Students in grades 3 to 5 specifically are given a range of text compiled in a student reader to reinforce and extend knowledge and reading skills through whole group, partner work, as well as independent reading time. And last but certainly not least, texts are appropriate grade level range decodability are used to build those foundational skills, language, and close reading. The decodable readers in CKLA will now be used with every student in kindergarten through grade 2. As we saw, for reading comprehension to improve, decoding ability needs to increase as well. So these decodable readers are truly a step forward toward more fluent, independent reading. The graphic here on this slide allows us to really look at the foundations of of writing. And really in CKLA, writing is built and woven within every lesson and every unit. We do participate in narrative, argumentative, and expository writing throughout every grade level throughout the years. So when we think of writing, we often think of putting pen to paper. And what we see here is writing is an art, and there truly are other capacities that have to be built for students to truly be successful in that art of writing. So to become proficient writers, students must develop receptive and expressive language, content and background knowledge, again, through those read alouds and that rich depth of knowledge, the ability to read complex texts, and their understanding of language conventions. The Amplify CKLA program is designed to teach these reading foundations in elementary school. We've learned that when students are able to build those writing skills in elementary school, they're going to have greater success as they move into the upper elementary grades, into middle school and high school. And hopefully these foundations that we set in place are, again, going to support them middle, high school, and even beyond.
All right, in terms of next steps, few things we have going on. So there's going to be ongoing conversations about the possibility of field testing. So as we close out the school year, what opportunities are there to roll out some of these materials to get that to teachers now, and an opportunity for them to learn from the program, which would then inform summer learning, right? So if there's an opportunity to get these materials out, familiarize, become internalization of the work, we're looking at options to do that. We are looking at getting materials in the hands of staff early. So it's a kind of a two-pronged approach. The first is this. All schools at this point with their literacy teachers have access to the hard copy materials K through 5 that they can access with the permission and obviously support of their literacy teacher. But more importantly, effective May 3rd or on or around May 3rd, we'll have digital access for all teachers in the school system. So that'll allow them to actually go in and see the materials digitally and have access to that at their will. Summer offerings, we talked about that. Again, we know PD is going to be an important part of an effective implementation of Amplify CKLA, and really making sure we're grounding this work in a key tenets of the science of reading. So we'll continue to think about those opportunities. There'll be both in-person and virtual opportunities over the summer. Those will be informed by what we've learned through the process and our PD thus far, plus what we may learn in some of the field testing that we try to do toward the end of the school year. We've talked about the long-range comprehensive literacy professional learning plan. That is actually a 3-year plan that we've talked through. So we didn't want to make this a one and done, right? This has got to be sustained professional learning that really helps us implement and then execute this work at an extremely high level over a duration of time, so we can internalize this work and really own it and do it well. So again, you have a copy, I believe, of what is marked as year 0 right now in terms of us just shaping the work and changing mindsets and preparing people for this work. As we move into subsequent years, we have a plan for that as well for the following 2 school years. We are partnering with our professional growth and development department. We're going to launch this year. It's going to be our first, what we're going to call annual Science of Learning Institute. So we're going to bring together keynote speakers and a lot of people, psychologists, professors, and some of our community partners. I know the Reading League of Maryland will be involved, University of Maryland. There's a nonprofit organization called MILE, which is the Maryland Initiative for Leadership and Equity, coming together to really talk about the science of learning. And what we know is for teachers to be able to do this work at a high level, it's not just about what you do and how you do it. It's also understanding the why behind that work. And so we want to make sure teachers truly understand the why and intent behind everything we're asking them to do and the reason why this program is structured the way it is. We do have contract through Amplify CKLA. We will be getting some additional support directly from that company. There is a number of instructional coaches that will support us in this work as we work to implement this in the summer and into the fall. Again, full year of PD for all staff. That's PK through 5 for science of reading. So we'll continue to do that work. And then last but not least, and very important, is that we understand that parents are partners in this work. And that we need to partner with them and make sure that they're very well aware and educated on this program so that they can support us and we can support them in making sure students are getting the best literacy instruction as possible. So that's kind of just a quick overarching view of the next steps. And we can go next here.
Okay, ready for some questions. So we're going to be using a roll call order this evening, and we'll be starting with Mr. Lynn. Mr. Lynn, you have questions? Okay. Ms. Frank?
A couple of observations and maybe some questions to come of that. So year 0 is a shifting of the mindsets. So when I hear that, I do wonder how often do we lose the ability to teach because we have to relearn and unlearn some things that we've taught before. So I always do worry about that when we get something new. I think this seems more in line with what I personally would like to see in school, and I'm glad we've kind of shifted. But I always do worry, whatever we get, I would like to see is the long term. So what is the length of a program, or what is the lifespan do you think that we'll see from this?
So I believe we are under contract for 6
6
years.
years.
So it's a 6-year contract. So at a minimum, there'll be a 6-year implementation of this particular program. Your concern is valid, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to be very intentional and deliberate around not just a one-stop shop, one PD. This is ongoing PD. We are now 6, 7, 8 months in advance of actually implementing this work. So we're out in front of it. And so we want to make sure, to your point, that this is change and that there's change management that comes with that. But unfortunately, we're a little late to the game, to be honest, in terms of moving to the science reading. So this is work that had to be done. This is a change that we have to embrace. But we will be very deliberate and intentional in terms of supporting our teachers for that 3 to 6 years that we talked about in our implementation plan and that contract length to make sure that we do this and we do this well. This is the highest leverage strategy we have as a school system to really move this organization to a place that it should be. So we do take this serious.
I don't disagree with the change itself. And I guess after 6 years, what do you look at? Do you just determine, hey, they're going to revamp this particular type of curriculum, they're going to add some, expanded pieces to it, or do you say at the end of 6 years, we're going to look at everything again?
Yeah. So ideally, we'd run a program evaluation, right? So as we get to years 3, 4, 5, 6, we'd actually look at performance and see if it's actually delivering. And if not, is it a function of the product itself, or is it implementation where we have to take a look at ourselves and say, could we have rolled this out better? But it's very hard to answer that until we get to the out years, maybe years 3, 4, 5, and 6, have that program evaluation, have that data. We could at that point make a determination with the superintendent's recommendation to go into a single textbook adoption process and open it up for other vendors. Doesn't mean we'd actually change products. It would just an opportunity to say, okay, what gaps have we maybe recognized in this product? What else is out there? And then we'd have to make that decision at that time.
Let me just add on to Dr. Duarte's response, because I think I will use power schools as an example. I mean, we've been a power school district for a long time, but there have been multiple iterations and generations of power school evolving. We know that the product is good, so our district has continued to be a power school district and actually a flagship school district in this country for power schools. And so even as they are now transitioning into really incorporating AI as a part of how we can leverage their tools, we know that they keep evolving. We think the same for this, as Dr. Duarte said. It doesn't, we're going to look at data. We're going to evaluate, is it doing what it was intended to do? And if it is, generally they end up moving to different generations of what they're able to offer. And so we will make that determination once we see what the data yields.
Okay, good. I hope that this is a long-standing endeavor. And
Me too.
yeah, I have more questions when we go back around, but I will go ahead and yield for now. Thank you.
I think you can go ahead if you'd
Oh,
like.
you want me to? Oh, sure. Oh, all right. A couple of other points. The language comprehension is reading and being surrounded by language and exposure to language. So obviously, the biggest component of that is reading to children, and totally support all of those efforts. It was interesting that you mentioned that the teachers are going to be reading some of the more advanced books so that you can get sort of that historical and broad-based understanding of language. I'm glad to hear that, and I'll take just a moment to sort of get on a soapbox and just encourage parents at home. I mean, I think the best thing you can do for your child is read to them at night. That was what my mother's advice was to me, and it was excellent advice. For the slides, my favorite slide that you had was slide 18. I actually screenshotted this before a meeting. I loved this. I'm a traditionalist, so I really appreciated weaving the stories and fables and fairy tales and the classic tales, and I was not a huge fan of Wind of the Willows, but I'm excited to see that, and I like seeing how it's woven in with the different grades so that there's a continuation there. So I really appreciate that. I would really enjoy seeing a little bit more of this, and really seeing how the continuation of the stories and fables build upon one another in the progressive years. So I appreciated that a lot. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Yes, I think I recall that I first in school encountered a Midsummer Night's Dream, and might have been fourth grade, and had to memorize one of Oberon's speeches, and I fell in love. And I think the idea of always presenting the fullest possible, the richest possible language, and never unintentionally speaking down to children is so critical. And to Ms. Frank's point, I have to say, I don't think children ever get tired of being read aloud to. And a particularly wonderful math teacher that my daughter had at Annapolis High for 2 years would begin his math classes with his very stressed out juniors and seniors by reading aloud to them a little bit of philosophy that was connected to whatever the math question was. And I just can't say enough about that. And I think that is something I truly appreciate about what I'm seeing here. So with all of that said, I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask. First of all, I'm very happy to see the emphasis as well on writing. Um, Actually, Montessori always said writing before reading. But the integration of writing and reading is so critical. Uh, but one quick question. You did mention pen to paper. Are students going to be putting pen to paper here? Okay, good, because there's a, that's part of the learning too, not just on screens. So great, thank you. And I figured that was the case, but I know there are those out there who have that question. Um, And I'm also glad to see the mention of the support for a wide range of teacher experience. Can you say a little more about that, how that works as far as you can tell or will work?
So part of the experience that those teachers will participate is internalizing the information and materials that they are given as a resource. And so that they are able then, based on their level of experience, what do they need more of? What are they capable and feeling confident about? So that's scaling it to their level of expertise. And also with our literacy teacher and the coaching that they'll receive in support of the school-based literacy teacher, and then also our Amplify educational consultants that will be boots on the ground with our schools.
So that brings me to another question, which may be more for Dr. Bedell. So we're rolling this out at the same time that we're implementing Blueprint and we're shifting around some staff. Are we going to have sufficient literacy teachers in each school? Because I know, we've got some elementary schools with 600 kids in them and some with a couple hundred kids. So perhaps you
Yes.
could say more.
So to answer that question, absolutely. Now, everything is contingent upon our ability to also hire
Right.
if we have vacancies. But part of what we wanted to focus on as we were going through this phase 2 reorg was to take a look at what schools had and what schools didn't have, which also resulted in us having to do some reallocation of FTEs to help us accomplish that.
So can I assume that the allocation of literacy teachers is based on the data from that school, right? Whatever is driving, whether it's, obviously the blueprint requirements of the student demographic, student population, whether there's high free and reduced meals or high ELL or whatever, and that will continue to be monitored along the lines also of the reading outcomes in those schools. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll let Dr. Duarte speak to that piece right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've been at is an base allocation of 1.0 FTEs for literacy teachers at all schools, with an additional 1.0 in some schools based on enrollment.
Okay.
Those variables and factors you're speaking to didn't always factor into it. It truly was the size of volume of enrollment. So we had schools that were high need schools by nature of high, percentage of students on free and reduced lunch meals, as well as some not so high need schools with two, because it was strictly based on enrollment. The decision was made, the recommendation was made by the Division of Academics to move to an allocation of 1.0 across the board, standardized at all schools. That was for a couple of reasons. One was for the redirection of positions to support our students with disabilities. And there's a lot of work to be done there, and there had to be support for them. Obviously, these are tough fiscal times. We had to make a challenging and tough decision, and we thought that was an opportunity to do that, to level set, to go an allocation of one across the board, no different than most elementary schools only have one school counselor or one assistant principal. So we figured 1.0. Now, we thought we could leverage that, given and making this connection to or transition to the science of reading, is we now have an evidence-based program that is highly structured, that has all the components that we know are best practice. So we felt this was an opportune time because we have got the right curriculum program that has a lot of support kind of interwoven into it. We felt we could actually make that reduction. And it wasn't really reduction, it was a reallocation of making sure we could shore up other areas that we just have basic major needs for students with disabilities. So that's the really quick version of that. It was not an easy decision to make. Of course, we can certainly look in, I know the Division of Academics will look at that and maybe make some budget requests as we go into FY26 for some of those positions back. But there was some work had to be done around special ed, particularly special ed students and their reading abilities. And we are confident that given that we're moving to this program, the work that we're doing systemically, that 1.0 at each elementary school will be enough to get this work done.
That's good. I mean, I know there was a lot of thought that went into that, but I just want to add to the conversation that obviously we want to make sure we're rolling this out for success. But also, as I know you're very focused on, Dr. Bedell, and all your staff are at this point, to make sure that the monitoring is really tight. If we see dips, we don't wait. You know, if what has been allocated just isn't getting it done, obviously we want to make those evidence-based changes, and I know you're committed to
Yeah.
that.
I mean, we are, and I think, you know, we talk a lot about having a pivot. I think we've already demonstrated that we will pivot and make adjustments as we look at data, and we will do that. I think even in the conversation that we're having right now, as we look at staffing allocations, I think those are things that we're taking a deep look at.
Yep. And just to say, as along with, I'm sure, my colleagues, you know, we're here to advocate, and the more we know about what the needs are, quickly, the more we can advocate. I think that does it for my questions. So thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Ms. Ellis.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for a great presentation. Gosh, when was it when we had the workshop on reading? Was that 3 years ago?
It was like May of
3 years ago,
21 or something.
maybe. Yeah, and
It was virtual.
I'm going to be honest. I have a completely different feeling today than I did 3 years ago after that workshop. So someone who did study the science of reading in college, someone who has taught children to read, I was just, everything I heard, I was like, check, check, check. Like, this is all rings true with what I know about kids learning to read. And so I am very optimistic with what I've seen today. Some of them were mentioned, read aloud. I mean, that is how kids develop language skills. Every student receiving the curriculum, that was one of my big concerns about how we were doing things previously. So I'm really happy about that. Field testing, parents are partners, love that. But that does bring up one of my first question. So what kind of support for those kids not getting that exposure at home? That's inevitable, but that's going to happen. So I assume we're going to be looking out to identify those gaps. Do we have a plan for those kids who are, you know, not going to get that exposure at home?
Okay, I'll take it. So yeah, so we do have a plan. So you know, naturally there's variation in terms of the resources students come to school with, right? And unfortunately, we do have situations where students come to school having not had some of the exposure and experience you're speaking to, which creates some gaps. So one of the things we're doing, so a couple of things, the program itself is designed to address that. So what they do is we have what's called, it's really DIBELS, but they call it M-Class. So it's a screening mechanism that kind of tells you how the students are performing. And then it gives you actually resources and tools, interventions, additional lessons, traced directly to each individual student's needs so that you can actually take time and backfill those gaps. So that's the one thing that the program does do. There are a lot of differentiation supports and tools within the program to differentiate for those students who have those gaps because they're just simply not getting some of the same exposure at home. We are looking and we're taking a critical look at the elementary school schedule right now in terms of how we can find a block of time to be really responsive. So can we create a 25, 30-minute block of time, a couple of days a week where we can respond to students' needs in terms of needing that differentiation, needing that additional time on task, needing time to have that targeted instruction that's so important to helping kids catch up. And at the same time, use that time for the other end of the continuum students who have some of those gifted and talented advanced learner needs and just creating a block. We've played with different names in terms of what it could be called, but we're really looking at a block right now so that we actually can be responsive. So we'll have the data by way of this program to determine what students need and exactly what they need. And then we're creating a block of time to make sure teachers and staff have time to then use those materials and resources to respond appropriately. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And let me just say this, because Dr. Duarte hit something on the head that we all have to consider as a community. And I also know that it's going to require that we have to have conversation with our unions. When you think about the amount of minutes that we have at our elementary schools in comparison to other elementary schools across the state, like, we shouldn't be in a situation where we're trying to hunt down minutes because we have one of the shortest schedules that's out there, and that's going to require a whole different lift that we have to figure out. You're talking about implications with transportation, the union negotiating aspect of it all. But I just think that there's a number of things that we have to look at, and we also have to just be mindful of the amount of stress that anything that we look like at that magnitude, that is going to put on the system. So I just want to remind, because I know I shared this with the board, that we have not shared this with the full community, but these are things that we're taking a look at. So when we talk about trying to get legislation passed so that we can really go to a minutes-based type model or an hours-based type model, some of these constraints we have, it makes it very difficult as we're looking at master scheduling and trying to make sure that we are able to fully implement and have those interventions that we want built in to the schedule to support our students.
And Ms. Ellis, just to further Dr. Bedell's point, it's so critical that that time is built into the instructional block, the instructional day, right? Because once we get to after school or before school clubs, that creates a bigger inequity, because a lot of the same students that come to school with these additional needs don't always have the transportation. So it's critical that we look at what we have right now. I know Dr. Bedell is going to have further conversations about, maybe an extended school day at some point, but in the immediate, we are thinking very creatively about how we can create that time to provide that support to those students, because that's the only way it can be responsive and individualized instruction to their particular needs. So thank you.
And also, if I can just add, if I put on my teacher hat, right, and I think about being in my classroom with 4th and 5th graders and talking about our writing, right? Oftentimes it was, let's write about what you did over the weekend or how you celebrated this or that. As a teacher, I can't help them because I wasn't there with them. But the writing base in CKLA is really built on this knowledge that we're providing. Therefore, all of our students really have an equal ground to start because that knowledge is built in their reading time, and therefore everyone has something to write about. And a teacher was there doing that read aloud, being part of that reader, and therefore they can help them move along in that writing process. I think of that at just a very simple level as the teacher.
Okay, that kind of leads to one of my next questions. I made a note about the cross-curricular aspect of this, which is great. This is another thing that I know is very successful. But when it can also be very complex, because when it's really implemented correctly, the curriculum across subjects is aligned, and that would be very complex. Is there a plan to align the learning schedule in social studies, science with what they're learning in reading?
So we're looking at a crosswalk of what that looks like. One of the things with CKLA is some particular topics may show up in CKLA in a particular grade, whereas the Maryland College Career Ready standards really unpack that further in a different grade. So we certainly will leverage opportunities that are available through CKLA, and also knowing we need to continue to provide the instruction specific to science as the students will be assessed on NISA or as social studies, because they'll now take 8th grade assessment in their coming years. So we are doing that internal work behind the scenes, but this does not replace the science or social studies curriculum, but it certainly does show some integration.
Right. I didn't think it would replace it, but as someone who taught students of different ages at the same time, that's one way to make learning really efficient, is to weave the reading instruction into the social studies, into the science. And so I guess my vision for the future is it'd be great if it could be aligned that way.
One of the shifts and pivots we made in the reorganization plan that we had in Dr. Bedell's phase 2 was we leveled our curriculum offices. And so in doing so, we actually created, so before we had one coordinator K through 12 for science, one K through 12 for social. That's a huge 13 grade bandwidth that you have to do that work. What we did was we leveled it. So now we have an elementary team, and there is naturally science and social studies coordinator specifically for elementary who will work alongside and under Amanda Salveron's supervision with our elementary math coordinator, our elementary reading coordinator, and our elementary ELD coordinator. So that way we can cohere that work. So to your point, there'll be a little bit more seamless integration because your literacy coordinator will be working in the same office under the same direct supervision of your coordinator of elementary science and social studies to cohere that work intentionally. So we're certainly not there yet, but we at least create the structure to have those conversations so we can braid that work together more effectively.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Back to, okay, transitioning to this curriculum. Sort of to echo a little bit of what Ms. Frank said, but a little bit of history here, when Common Core was rolled out largely across the country for a while, and there are big changes in the way math was taught. It was even hard for teachers to grasp. I suspect there's going to be much less of that with this than with math, but I know one of the challenges with the changes in the math was that students who had already had a couple of years of math, they were already on their way down a different path. And so I'm wondering about like the 2nd to 4th graders who are now going to be introduced to this curriculum. Do you anticipate there's going to be any challenges there that don't have the foundation of the beginning of this?
I certainly anticipate that we are going to come up against some of those challenges. I think some of the work, again, it started with mindsets, but I think Ms. Batten also mentioned the unit and lesson internalization that we're working through with literacy teachers this year and moving that into a structured process of collaborative planning with our teachers for the rollout in 24-25. CKLA in the introduction of each unit does give some of those prerequisites, what they may have seen before. And what we need to ensure is that our teachers know that they can't go back and reteach all of that, but how do we ensure that our teachers understand where that entry point is for the students at that grade level and how we, again, support them and scaffold so that they can be successful with grade level curriculum.
Okay. So there's not, let's say, a transition piece of the curriculum, because when I introduced a new math curriculum to my students, because a couple of them had been in elementary school and then came home, and there was a transition book that kind of went back and taught them some like really basic stuff, but from this foundation. There's no kind of transition piece in the curriculum that'll help you through that. You're just going to...
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and I don't think to
Okay.
the extent that you're speaking of,
Okay.
that doesn't
Okay.
exist.
And then another question is the field testing. You mentioned summer offerings. I believe you were talking about to get teachers
Professional learning.
on board with
Mhm.
this. But we do have summer programming for students. Are we going to take a stab at this at that point? Do we have enough? No.
That's
Okay.
not something we discussed, no.
Okay. I just thought it might be an opportunity to sort of test it out. But. Okay. And then just finally, going back to what I said about what I'm familiar with reading, there were questions and discussion about evaluating this product after 6 years. And, will there be a need for revamping? And my observation is that learning to read is not different than it was when I was a young child. And since that time, there's been so many attempts to reinvent the wheel. And I believe the science of reading has largely confirmed the practices that existed decades ago and are correct, with the exception of adding some more culturally inclusive, samples as they're learning and texts. So therefore, my hope, and again, I'm feeling very optimistic. I hope this is everything I think it is. I hope that the result is stabilizing how we teach reading and that we don't try to fix what is already working. And hopefully we eliminate so much demand for our literacy teachers. We love our literacy teachers, and they'll be here for the students, who need that support. But I'm sure that's the goal.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Shalheim.
Thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. Wow, y'all, a lot of my questions are already answered, thankfully. So I did have that sort of a similar question about how we're going to continue to challenge, gifted and talented learners. If it was a one size fits all sort of model, it sounds like that's a no, and that we're trying to weave in some of those extra blocks
Absolutely.
of time
Mhm.
to continue to challenge and push those kids even further. That's correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. And then regarding the changing in the mindset, how are our educators feeling about this so far? Is it being received well? Because to Miss Ellis's point, I think we all learned to read under the science of reading in the day, although it wasn't called that. I do remember phonics instruction. I do remember. But how is it being received?
So, we all have probably anecdotal vantage points to speak from. From what I'm hearing, it's actually been received overwhelmingly positively. Now, there are some very deep-rooted beliefs about teaching students to read. But one of the conversations we've had in the organization is, well, this is now settled science, to Mrs. Ellis's point, right? This is now settled science. This is where we're going. It also helps, I'll be honest with you, that we have a probably disproportionately young teaching corps right now that is very inexperienced. And the beauty of that is a little more apt for change. And they don't have the decades and decades of deep-rooted beliefs about teaching students to read using the queuing system and all the other things. It's really, hey, if this is what that district is asking us to do, they like the fact that it's a structured program. It's all there for them. So I've heard nothing but really positive responses from the majority of people I've spoken to. I haven't heard anyone say any major concerns. Even a lot of the constituent emails that Dr. Bedell and I receive, it's been met with a lot of positivity.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if their experience has been different, so please, if you.
I would agree. We had an opportunity to, again, roll out to principals a bit earlier. Again, in Reveal, we were kind of in May. In CKLA, we really got to them back in December, January, and started with that mindset. And we use a slide frequently with our principals as well as our literacy teachers that says, wait, but why? And again, so working through that process with their mindset, but most of them are very open. They are looking for a change, and they recognize that we need to do something to support our students' reading ability.
That's great. Going back to the benefits of reading aloud, my 13-year-old still loves to be read to every night, and is frustrated when that doesn't or can't happen because of scheduling. So the benefits continue into early teenage years, and it's because of that I believe that's why she's so strong in English language arts. Yeah, that she's had entirely at AACPS. So yeah. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shalheim. So thank you so much for the presentation. And Ms. Shalheim, you actually did ask my question, or one of my questions anyway, that how would you characterize the mindset of staff as we approach the end of 2023-24? And I think you addressed that. I think there's another mindset, at least if I'm going back to my teacher days. So I remember there were far too many students that would appear who hated to read. And so the mindset that I think we need to instill in all of our our kids is that reading is fun. It's a chance to take journeys that we would not maybe be able to take otherwise. And so I'm very happy about where we're going. And I have all the confidence in the world that we're going to get where we need to be. However, I'm still thinking in my mind, so I'm a middle school teacher. What's my role? I'm a high school teacher. What's my role? When I was a high school teacher, students would show up in grade 9, discipline problems, but that was because they couldn't read. And so what do we have in place to make sure when we say that being literate is a right, that every single child that goes from grade 5 to grade 6 is on the right path?
So I
I
think
don't know
that,
that we have an answer for that. I'm just kind of putting it out there.
yeah, I mean, I can certainly offer a little bit of commentary, and obviously Ms. Batten and Ms. Elron can jump in. I think my initial reaction is it's kind of a three-pronged approach, right? So we do think that building a foundation, right? Building it from the foundation up, right? Getting it right with Reveal, getting it right with Amplify CKLA, because if we do what we're supposed to do well and shore up K through 2, K through 5, you'll see less of that at the high school level. Some of that's a function of I don't want to read, I don't like to read because I don't read or I don't read particularly well. And so we can reduce that by getting really good core instruction at the elementary school level, doing it the right way, building it with the right foundation. I think that'll mitigate some of that. Now, when we talk to the secondary school principals, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow in more depth, I don't want to go too far off script, but we're going to be meeting with the secondary school principals actually tomorrow here in this room about what we're going to call rolling out an instructional framework for our secondary schools. And one of the key focuses in that framework is going to be what we're going to call literacy-focused instruction. That students at the secondary level, right, are getting a lot of exposure to independent reading, to writing opportunities, to discussion that brings in that receptive and expressive literacy. So we understand that to do this the right way, the science of reading is always built a little bit as a K through 5 approach, but we understand that you have to have that continuum, that they continue to have literacy type instruction, reading, writing, discussion, and annotation all the way through that continuum, and that our schools have to be very deliberate about instructing students with those strategies. So that's the second part. The third part would be we do have to have and take a critical look at our, what I would say, our transitional supports. So we know when we transition from 5th to 6th grade, what does our 6th grade reading intervention look like for those students? For whatever reason, we didn't get caught up in 5th grade, right? So do we have an intervention program, a robust program to catch those students up in 6th grade? Same thing again in 9th grade. The idea is that we're going to create some type of filter. If we do this reading instruction the right way, K through 5, we'll get most students. And if we have some transitional service and supports 5th to 6th in terms of intervention in 6th grade, we'll catch up a lot of students, and hopefully we can kind of eliminate the need for anything beyond 9th grade intervention if we do this the right way. So we're kind of playing the long game. It's going to take a lot of intentional and deliberate work, but that's the only way I can answer your question right now.
Thank you. So I do see a couple lights. I'm not quite sure which one came in first. So I'm going to say Ms. Frank.
Thank you. I just, hearing some of the comments from my colleagues, I wanted to know, do we have a student, when we were talking about the time and trying to collect the minute and finding the time for this, do we have students mentoring other students in elementary school? Do we have 5th graders reading to 1st graders just to get them that exposure and programs like that?
So yes, it does occur. We don't have a set structure that all schools follow, but there are many peer buddies that participate in those type of activities. So it varies among schools of what that looks like.
And I could tell you one of my recent visits, I can't remember what elementary school I attended, but they actually had high schoolers who came in to read to some of the kids in those elementary schools.
And I have seen it at the high school level. It seems like it would be more complicated to take the high schoolers over to the elementary school, et cetera, et cetera. I see an opportunity. I know some students at 4th and 5th grade are very strong readers, and that level of maturity is there and helps build them in a leadership role, and it also helps to reinforce their own ability to read and orate. I would love to see more structure in that and have that opportunity for other schools. I find great value in mentoring, and I know that if teachers don't have the time and capacity necessarily to have those small groups, I think that children are wonderful teachers too. So just a thought on that. And then also I loved the comment from Miss Ellis, don't try to fix what is already working. Absolutely agree with that. And I love that you still have slide 18 up, so thank you. It was my favorite.
Yes. So a couple of things as questions were answered. I am particularly delighted to hear about the writing based on that shared knowledge. That is, I think, one of the most critical things because it's so wrapped up with close reading as well, right? When you have to go back and think about what something means. And I think as students move forward beyond school, whether it's immediately into a career or along the college path, speaking as a former college professor, that's at the core of what happens in college, right? And if it starts at kindergarten and first grade, all the better. I agree with Ms. Frank about the student mentoring. I think that may have been talked about when we did the tour of the Montessori school. That's a core practice in Montessori and a number of other things, because as all of us know, you don't really learn something until you have to teach it, right? Until you have to explain it to somebody. And I have found overwhelmingly older children love to work with younger children, and younger children much prefer to learn something from an older child than an adult sometimes. So, they're getting to be with the bigger kids is in and of itself a real carrot often. So that brings me to my other question, which I forgot to ask. And as you know, you've heard Mr. Silkworth and me geek out up here on, diagramming sentences and all the rest of it. So what's the grammar component here?
Yep. You got it?
Sure.
No, you got it.
There's so I've spent quite a lot of time recently reading units at
Yeah.
each grade level, and from beginning to end. So just some things that I can think of off the top of my head, right? So we are going back to some spelling, right? Looking at the roots of words, so that morphology piece. Where there's a component called word work, right? So we are building sentences. What are the parts of the
It's
sentence?
speech,
Some of those
right.
foundations which are there. And that does start in the skills all the way down in kindergarten. And even though it is an integrated lesson when we get to grades 3 to 5, those higher level foundational skills are still part of that. So there is writing, again, that is maybe responsive, again, that narrative, expository, argumentative, but there's also an element of teaching students to write to source, to be able to form those sentences, those paragraphs, and then ultimately to those essays.
I mean, I really, to get briefly on a soapbox here, and I'll try to climb down quickly. I think I have always believed that knowing the components of writing for yourself, just as knowing the components of reading for yourself, is a huge source of freedom. You're not subject to somebody else sort of having to look at someone else's writing and sort of pull it together for yourself. When it comes to expressing your own thoughts, you have the components. It's just like, it's just like chemistry, right? If you don't know what the components are, you can't begin to really get there. And so I think that is, it has to do with agency on some level. And I think maybe because I've just spent a weekend, immersed in civic education, but this is not unconnected. And so I share my colleagues' very optimistic view of this, because it does echo, I think, the components many of us grew. I mean, I'm older than most of my component, but what I was taught, and what builds these skills. And these skills are a muscle. And so I just hope, and what I have found is most children don't begin to get the parts of speech till they, and even that is less so than it once was, until they take a second language. And, that's just not your own language. You should understand. Now, I have been accused of single-handedly trying to keep the adverb alive. I understand everybody has they're
Our-
different.
Our second graders are going to see adverbs.
Yeah,
just-
Good. So adverbs, I hope, continue to exist. But I just think that that ability to express yourself, all the things that we are working through right now, whether it's mental health, quite frankly, whether it's a sense that your voice matters, all of those things come right back to the ability, the sense that you can say what you have to say, and you can do it in a way that other people who aren't just like you can understand. And so I will continue to advocate for that, but I'm so delighted to see this, and I'm delighted to see the intentional way it is being put together for all the reasons asked about, sort of whiplashing into something else. The science of reading implies the scientific method, and that is open-ended. It's subject to change when and if the data tell us that change needs to happen. But assuming we're on a path that remains supported by the appropriate methodology and examination, I would imagine that we are going to be able to stay the course here, and I would hope that we will. So thank you. Thank you for letting me get on my soapbox.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Ms. Ellis.
Dr. Tobin, and now you've opened up another can of worms, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't be quiet on this one. I can't believe I didn't ask that question. I'm going to tell everyone something very personal here right now. Grammar is probably the primary reason we made a different choice for our kids in lower elementary school. It's just a fact. And everything you said about it is so true. I would love to see sentence diagramming. I mean, that really teaches kids about language. And there are very quick supplemental materials, exercises that complement every language arts curriculum. I highly recommend sentence diagramming. Usually starts around first to second to third grade. But anyway, I thank you, Dr. Tobin. I had to make that plug because it really is critical to have that grammar component. Thank you.
Same choice my family made for the same reason.
So thank you, Ms. Ellis. I have to respond myself.
Sorry, folks.
Not a problem. Diagramming. I learned to diagram sentences in grade 7. By the time we got to grade 9, I had an excellent understanding of the ins and outs and the workings of the English language. If you want someone to fix your automobile, you want someone that can take that motor apart, knows the parts, knows how they function and how to put them back together again. Now, I taught for a few years, and many of my students would always say, Mr. Silkworth, I learned more English in your French class than I learned in my English class. And I took that as a compliment, but to some extent, it was almost a difference in philosophy about teaching. So would I be in favor of bringing back diagramming? Oh my goodness, I didn't even know it left. It went anywhere. But also, as a language teacher, I was taught many, many, many years ago teaching language, and this may be contrary to some strategies in today's world. We have 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And you have to interweave within all of that culture. And so the first 2-3 weeks of any year in a level 1 class, there was no alphabet. There was no written language. And it makes me wonder, because how many of our young people come into our schools and they actually are having difficulty with being good listeners and being verbal. I can tell you, we never put the written word in front of students in language for a large part of my career, simply because they would interpret it in different ways. And each of them would come from a different home, different culture, and their interpretation would be different. And particularly it would impact their pronunciation, because their pronunciation would be anglicized. So having said that, I mean, it started to make me think how our young people, as they're coming into our elementary schools, pre-K, grade 1, 2, and we want them to read, but we want them to be good listeners, and we want them to talk first. So I just thought I would throw that out there. And again, everyone out there that believes in diagramming, I know there's at least 3 of us up here, 4 of us up here. So,
Mr. Silkworth, if I could
yes.
just make a quick comment as a former first grade teacher and our early childhood teachers out there, that's why play is so important in our pre-kindergarten
absolutely right.
classrooms.
You're absolutely right. So I would like to thank you all for such a great presentation, and we are so appreciative. And I think, Miss Ellis, I think you're right. I feel a lot better now than I did 3 years ago. So, I see no more lights.
Thank you, team. Appreciate you all.
Thank you
Great job.
so
Great
much.
job.
Great job. Good night.
Nice job, ladies. Nice job. Nice job.